But we're going to move right along on the program so we can get our speaker up here. Our Mayor Stephen Haynes, which is a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine. So at this time, I'd like to introduce no one other than our illustrious Mayor Stephen Haynes.
Thank you, Jocko. I got to tell you, I'm always a little humbled and blown away at the audience that we have at this presentation. And it really speaks volumes to this community that there are 200 people that are willing to come out and spend their lunch on a weekday to be interested in what's going on in our city. I serve on several TML regional boards, have the opportunity to speak with other mayors and other city managers. I can promise you when they do their State of the City address, they don't have the type of attendance that we have here. So I very much want to thank you for that. I'm thinking this is the 8th one of these that I've done. I think the first one that I did, I carried my TV from home, carried it on my back into the country club and set it up with my laptop, and that's the way we did the presentation. So we've evolved a little bit. And back then I was a young guy that was really good at technology, and now I'm an old guy that can barely work the remote control. So I had to invoke the help of Marshall McIntosh. I want you to know that Emily helped, but Marshall McIntosh did a laboring oar on putting the presentation together, and I want you to recognize him and give him a I'm going to start out this morning. You know, when we have really high-profile people that come to the city and are new to our city, it's a big deal. And this last year, we were able to hire a new fire chief, and we were able to hire Eddie Woodham, and ask Eddie to stand, if you would, just for a second, so y'all will know who he is. Jimmy recognized John, who's your new director of the water board. I want to be sure that he's recognized and that y'all know who he is as well. Thank you, John. Eddie, the best thing I can say about Eddie, and this is, it really is, it speaks volumes about him. But I always love it when I get compliments from the people in town about our folks. But it's even more impressive when I get compliments from their subordinates. And I have had no less than 10 firefighters that have come to me and thanked me for the job that you're doing. So keep it up. And I'll tell you that, I'll echo that remark with our police chief. Terry, you did a great job. And we appreciate what you did. This past year, we also hired Roland Soto. Roland was hired to be our sports coordinator, and I think I told you a little bit about this last year, but let me tell you the idea. One of the things we have, you'll see some pictures in a second, we have these great facilities in Brownwood, especially for our sports now, the soccer complex and the baseball complex. And one of the things that we told people in building those was that those would be tourism centers. They would be places that would bring people into Brownwood. Well, that only works if you're actively recruiting those events, right? In other words, you can't just build it and hope they'll show up. You actually have to be proactive in getting those tournaments, getting those people to come. So Roland was hired to help us keep our facilities open, rentable, playable, 365 days a year. And he's done a great job with that. One of the things, and I won't hit all these accomplishments, but one of the things we did this year was to bring back the basketball tournament that we had in Christmas. It was an enormous amount of teams over Roland. Where is Roland? Is he here soon? How many teams we had? 26 teams that came from out of town, filled our hotels, ate in our restaurants. Big deal, and a big deal for the community. Let's face it, you want people coming to your community from other places. You want that word of mouth. You want people traveling here and seeing this as a tourism destination. And Roland's done a great job in getting that started. I'm going to move on, and one of the things I always do in the presentation is trying to give you a feeling of the economy. And this year is a little bit of a strange year because what you're going to see, we're going to start off, and we always start off with sales tax, and you're going to see that our sales tax went down a little bit this year. And I'm losing mine. There we go. Sales tax went down a little bit this year, and y'all can probably see the number, but it went down from $7 million to roughly $6.7 million. $300,000 or so dollars in a decrease in our sales tax. It's a little bit hard to explain. We talked a little bit about this last year because we could see the trend coming, but it's a little hard to explain because all the other economic data that we're going to look at is very, very positive. A lot of good things happening in Brownwood, and so you kind of scratch your head a little bit and say, well, why are sales tax applications down? Honestly, all I can do is give you a guess, but my personal opinion is it was primarily because of the 2 big box stores just closed. We had Hastings closed and we had Staples closed in a year, and we saw basically a year worth of those closing. Now, Harbor Freight has moved in where Staples was. There's some hopefully substantial efforts being made on the Hastings building to build that building, so hopefully we're going to see that turn the corner and come back. I will point out, though, that even with the decrease we had in sales tax this past year, we are still several $100,000 where we were, ahead of where we were annually in 13 and 14. If you went all the way back to 2010, we would be over $1 million annually in increased sales tax. So no reason to sound the alarm quite yet. It's a troubling trend. We talked about this last year. I think it's probably online sales, people going outside of our community to buy things that are not available here. But all the other data we look at is very, very positive. So one of the biggest ones was building valuations. The odd thing was it seemed like when we were having this sales tax growth, nobody was building anything. And we were seeing sales tax go off the chart, but nobody was building any buildings. Well, now we've got the opposite. The last 2 years, while sales taxes declined, we've had an enormous amount of building. Going back this past year to over $20 million in building, and a lot of people putting structures on the ground. And that's a great thing. That means that people are investing dollars in our community and have and intend to stay here a long time. Looking at our real estate data, I think our first one up here is our sales volume, the number of closed transactions that happened in 2016. Again, off the charts, 391, a 22% increase in sales tax from 2016. Go back and look at your sales volumes in 2013 and you see how far we've come. Most people in the real estate business held out that 2008 time period as kind of the peak of the real estate market and everything was blowing and going. And 2009 was that era where we saw the zero and prime mortgage crash and real estate fell. But look what's happened to our residential sales volumes. We've gotten all the way back up to where we were in 2008 as far as the number of properties, $50 million plus, and the total volume and number of properties that are sold. So again, people are buying properties in Brownwood for good prices, and that's a good thing. Our hotel occupancy tax. So this is somewhat of a measure of those tourism dollars that we talked about. We had to estimate this one because we don't have our quarterly intake from the hoteliers yet. But if you assume that the last quarter will be similar to what it has been the last 2 or 3, then we expect our hotel occupancy tax to greatly exceed last year's collection by about $30,000 or $40,000, but certainly a really good trend upward in relation to those hotel occupancy tax. So that tells us that the things we're doing in tourism are working. I think Rowan's efforts, for example, in the basketball tournament probably won't even show up on this quarter because of the lateness in which they're reported in the year. Unemployment. So you look at unemployment and we're at 3.4%. That's statistically no unemployment. I mean, everybody who's looking for a job is finding a job. I'm sure there's somebody out there looking for a job that would argue with me about that statement. But statistically, they'll tell you, economists will tell you, when you get to 4% unemployment, you don't have any unemployment. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's both, okay? It's a great thing because our local people have jobs. It's a really challenging thing when we're trying to recruit additional companies to come into work in Brownwood because what's their first question? Who's going to work there, right? And I probably told this story before, but at the risk of telling it again, we had a chance one time several years ago to get an expansion at one of our plants. And we flew to Georgia to go try to recruit this plant. And we had this great layout of all the things we could do to bring this company to town. And at the end of the day, we didn't get the project because we had 4% unemployment and the other competing city had 9% unemployment. And that was how the decision was made. So we don't want high unemployment. That's not an issue that we want by any imagination. But it tells me that our economy is performing exceptionally well. If you'll remember a couple of years ago, 13, we had some numbers up there as high as 6 or 8%, double what we are now. So very, very positive economy number. Looking at some of the things as far as development, some of the things that have happened in this past year, Probably the biggest thing that happened as far as residential development was the creation of the Indian Creek townhomes. I can't tell you what a big project that was for the city of Brownwood. So Indian Creek townhomes is 120 plus, I think that number's right, I know it's over 100, in residential apartments, condominium type apartments that are non-subsidized. So to my knowledge, this is the first non-subsidized residential apartment complex built in Brownwood since probably the late 70s or early 80s. So that's a big deal for Brownwood. Again, when we have our companies come through town, the next question they ask for unemployment is, well, if we bring people in, then what's the next question? Where are they going to live, right? And we don't have anywhere to put them. We don't have any housing capacity, particularly in the rental markets. And so this is a big deal for us to end up with those units. I'll tell you, at least my most recent conversation with the developer was interesting in that the comments he made to us is that he was having tremendous success with his bigger, more bedroom units, 2 and 3 bedroom units was what he was seeing a huge demand for, and was already looking at building some additional units of that size. We also had Ronnie McCann and his company have also done the Waterstone development. That's another kind of zero lot line development off 4th Street, condominium style for private purchase, but again, a really unique, something different for Brownwood, gated community, something we haven't had, and a huge investment in our community made by that company, and so we're very appreciative of that development as well. And as far as our commercial project goes, one of the biggest developments we've got going right now is in our medical field. Hendricks built a brand new surgery center, and now they just yesterday actually had the groundbreaking for their doctor's offices and things that go through that. Again, an enormous investment, a lot of dollars spent in our community, hopefully a lot of white-collar jobs that were created. When we looked at the new development next door, the one that they broke on ground yesterday, my recollection is the projected numbers were approximately, I can't remember the number, 70, is that right? 34, but the salaries, the estimated salaries were in the $75,000 range. And so we're talking about real jobs, great white-collar, high-paying jobs, something we've tried really hard to recruit and hopefully have done well in that project. As I mentioned earlier, we did have, of course, Harbor Freight come in over the year and take over where Staples was. Of course, the Jacobs family has bought Weekly Watson's and turned that into, from a True Value store into an Ace store, and done a lot of renovation on that store. If you haven't been in, you need to go in and look around. Done some really great things there. I think that news came out maybe right after the State of the City address last year, that Mike, who's here this morning, had announced that their family was going to get out of the business. And so happy to see the Jacobs family take it over. I know everyone in town wanted to see that particular business saved, and we're very thankful that it was. Glenn Hager came through town. We're talking about industrial jobs. Glenn Hager came through town and talked about the fact that Brownwood's industrial growth, even in the most recent years, has outpaced state averages. So it's not just in the retail and commercial sectors, but also in our industrial corridor, we're performing very well and doing a lot of the good things there. I do know, I didn't get an opportunity, I did get permission to announce it. I do know for a fact that there is a new business coming into our industrial park, taking over one of the other facilities, and hopefully going to be hiring quite a few number of jobs. So hopefully that'll be announced here in the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, just some ongoing projects in the cities, things to think about, all the things that's been accomplished. We have done approximately 30 miles of streets. This is an interesting stat here. So we have 350 lane miles to try to maintain the city of Brownwood. That would be like repaving the road from Brownwood to Roswell, New Mexico. That's the burden that we have, the amount of lanes that we've got to do. We've made it through 30 miles, hey, 10%, and we're getting there. But it's all we can afford to do, and we're doing as much as we can, as fast as we can. Hopefully people have seen we've tried to start with our major corridors, try to get those roads that are heavily traveled back in really good shape. Okay. A couple of projects here, and I'm gonna kind of be honest about these projects, next couple of projects. So honestly, a couple of projects that I really didn't want to do, to be fair and honest with you. But we've got we got the depot several years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago. There were projects that depot was restored. It's a beautiful facility, great facility for our community. We didn't even know anything was wrong, and all of a sudden we come along and they're like, hey, everything's rotting. You can see the wood trim and how bad it had become. It's leaking. And all of a sudden we had a $350,000 repair. 200? Okay, only $250,000 repair. Only $250,000. But it gives you an example and the flair of the kind of thing sometimes you're dealt with. I mean, I know you get it, you understand it, that you're going along pretty well and everything is doing great in your house, and then you have a hailstorm and now you got a $1,200 deductible that you didn't have the money to pay. And we run into those things at the city as well. But one of the things we can't do is we can't allow our infrastructure, to use a kind of a common word now, we can't allow our city facilities and our infrastructure to just continue to deteriorate. I'll have to say, I fought it for at least one meeting. I managed to push it off one meeting until I could go and look at it for myself, and then we undertook the depot restoration. Certainly did not want to undertake this project. I assure you that no elected official has ever said, you know what I really want to do is I really want to rebuild the wastewater treatment plant. But unfortunately, TCEQ mandate and EPA mandates said that we had to undertake that job. Now, $6.5 million to the taxpayer is what I would call that an unfunded mandate that we have no choice to undertake. But we do have a very nice facility, hopefully, that will last us for years and years. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. There's nothing more expensive that we do in the city of Brownwood besides treating our wastewater. It has become a very, very expensive proposition, and yet a necessary one. We have worked hard to clean up some of our deteriorated structures. So if you look at our numbers there, we've gone, from as low in 2012, where we had 20 dilapidated structures that were removed, to a high in 2017 of 48. I think the council is relatively committed to that. I think there's a next generation idea beyond that, and that is, what do you do with those empty lots once you've torn down the houses? Because nobody wants a dilapidated house next door, but nobody really wants an empty lot either. And so we've got to come be creative. I'm not sure, I don't have solutions or ideas, but it's a dialogue. If you have ideas, I'd be happy to share them with us. What do you do with those lots once they're cleaned and removed and the house, dilapidated structures are torn down? But we need to address that issue as well. We privatized the pecan orchard. Some of you may know that the city of Brownwood, not even sure how this got started, but for years has owned the pecan orchard off of C.C. Woodson. So all the pecan trees you see over there, that was actually a city-owned facility. We paid the employee, we ran the pecan orchard. Emily and I sat down about this last year and we said, why are we in the pecan business? And so we privatized it, we leased it out. And so we no longer have any employees at the pecan orchard. I know for some of those who've been around a long time, probably don't like that because it was a marquee item for a long time for the city of Brownwood. For those of y'all who still remember the name Grunner Pitts, I've heard stories about Grunner taking bags of Brownwood pecans to the United States Capitol and delivering them to all the elected officials with the Brownwood logo on the bag. And not to say that's not important, but in modern times, Emily and the council and others, we felt it was the right thing to do to privatize that particular industry. And so it is now still being operated under a grant development with the USDA, but now being privately run and leased, and the city simply gets the lease proceeds. I'm not going to hit necessarily the details in the house and the utility lines, but I just want you guys to know that with this cold spell that we've had water line breaks, and you've got men and women that are out standing in freezing cold water fixing line breaks, and this is a tough job, one that doesn't pay as well as it should, and those guys do a yeoman's job for us. Several parks and recreations projects. Mr. Miller, or Councilman Miller, led the project for the Cecil Homer Park renovations. A lot of that was private money. A lot of it came from outside the city of Brownwood. The city of Brownwood did make some contributions to restoring Cecil Homer Park, put a lot of new beautiful equipment there. Let me go back one slide. Just a picture of a soccer complex. I'm going to tell you, if y'all haven't been out to our soccer complex, if you don't have young kids and you haven't been out to the soccer complex, and and the baseball complex. You need to get out there and see that facility in use. Syntex held a soccer tournament, I think, and they held one in the fall and in the spring, and they had, again, a great number of teams that came and attended those. And you ought to hear the people talk about our facilities, because we're kind of the talk of the town as far as the quality of the facilities, the way they're designed, the way they're utilized. You guys should be very, very proud of those, because I'm telling you, they're top-notch facilities. We went to my girls have been fortunate enough to get to the state soccer tournament several times, and we've been to Plano and played in Plano, and frankly, their facilities are not nearly as well designed and not nearly as well maintained as what we have here. We did obviously put in the splash pads this year. That was something that the council had talked about for a long time. Probably, and you see it on social media, you see it everywhere. If I get 100 complaints, criticisms about Brownwood in a year, 50 of them are going to be, we have nothing for our kids to do, right? That's kind of number one on the list of complaints. And so in the last year, we have added a skate park, we added the splash pads. This year, trying to give people options for entertainment, frankly, that's free, that they can go to, that's affordable, that they can spend time with their families. And it was heartwarming, to tell you the honest truth, when they turn on that first splash pad and there's 200 people on opening night out there with their family. And even to this day, we ran those into October. And every night I would drive by the one in Austin Avenue going home, and they were being well utilized. So I think it's an investment. It wasn't an investment, it wasn't expenditure, but I think it's an investment in families. And it's an investment in our community that I think will pay dividends when they see the city reinvesting in the things that they want to do with their family. We've done some things at Famous Park. To be honest with you, I don't get out to Famous Park as much as I'd like to. But Councilman McMillan has led the charge to get Famous Park renovated and get it in good shape. And so we've got, if you haven't been out there, go take a look. Some new campsites, new volleyball areas, some things to play. It's a good example of little things that the city can do that frankly are not very cost prohibitive. I mean, they're setting up a fire ring in the park or for a campsite, and it costs $40, but it makes a difference to the camper that's coming there. So this is a good project, something that was done again to support families and things for families to do in this area. All right, so now I'm going to get to the fun part of the presentation, and we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the trend right now is people talking about property tax and property tax reform. That's become the hottest political topic over the last 2 years, and so I'm going to spend quite a bit of time going over this. And for anyone who wants to go to sleep, you're welcome to go to sleep. This is dry and boring stuff, but I think it's important from this standpoint. When we talk about governmental spending, when we talk about budget, when we talk about taxes, one of the things that I think government does so poorly is we don't communicate. And we don't tell the people or explain to the people where their tax dollars are going. We don't explain to them how those decisions are being made. So this may be very boring to you, but hang with me, because what I'm trying to do is try to take, frankly, a pretty complicated topic and make it as simple as I can. Almost everyone in this room would agree with the statement that government ought to be run like a business, right? And so it is a business. In the city of Brownwood, it's a $34 million business, which is a big business to run. And we have to make decisions the way businesses would sometimes make them. So I'm going to go through some of the business type analysis that we go through in figuring out what we're doing and whether we're operating a good business. This is our budget chart. So when I was elected mayor in 2010, our first budget was just a little bit over $29 million. I'm going to show you a stat in a minute. We actually had a tax decrease in 2010 because what happened was our certified tax roll went down. That was the crash of the housing market. I know you don't believe it now because the trend's gone the other way, but people's values on the properties actually went down, and we actually collected less tax in 2010 than we did in 2009. But in any event, we started with a $29 million budget. We are now at a $34 million budget. So over 8 years' time, that means our budget's gone up about 15.9%, right to 16%, which is roughly less than 2% a year. Okay? So for y'all that are in business and you run business, this Chamber of Commerce event, I'm assuming most of y'all are in some type of business, when you think about your business and how it's operated, Does your spending go up more or less than 2%? Okay? Is $29 million to $34 million a big jump? It is. It's $4 million, $5 million, right? But it's 2% annually on average. I'll leave it to you whether that's a reasonable increase in revenue and a reasonable increase in spending. So one of the things I wanted to know was, one of the reasons businesses go up, y'all know the reasons that they go up, but one of the big reasons is inflation, right? The things that you buy cost more money. Your staff desires to be paid more money. We're going to talk about staff in a second, but when we have this mindset that government spending can never go up, I want you to think about that logically for a second. Then they took on the year before. That the cost of goods sold never goes up. That it doesn't cost you more money. It's not the way business runs. We all know that in our businesses. And it's not the way government operates either. So what I wanted to know, is our spending reflecting budgetary inflation? In other words, is our spending increasing out of proportion to inflation? Or are we only maintaining the status quo? I have no idea whether this is an accurate tool or not, but it's the only tool I can find. So I went online, and you can do it too, and I Googled inflation calculator, and I came up with this online program. And so I put in our budget in 2010 of $29,619,000. And you can read there, it says, if I purchased that amount of money in 2017, what would it cost today? And the answer that the program picks out is $33,295,203. So a difference of 12%. So in that 8 years where we've seen a 15.9% increase in our spending or our revenue or our budget, we've seen a 12.4% in relation to inflation. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we have actually outpaced inflation slightly, 3% over 8 years. It means our spending has gone up about a 0.5 percentage point more than inflation every year. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you a chart in a minute where it hasn't actually been a straight line as you would anticipate. But that's actually how we performed and actually what we did. This is a little different analysis, but very similar. So now I'm looking at it from actually what they call a consumer price index. So we're looking at the stuff that cities buy, road materials and asphalt and guns and fire equipment. And so they actually put this on a CPI index. And you'll see there the blue line going down, that's the tax decrease in 2009 that I told you about. The numbers are slightly different here because we used a different time period. I think when the financial office pulled this data, they pulled in actually the 9-year, which had the tax decrease, so it changes the percentages just a little bit. But you notice over the average of that period, from 2009 now until 2017, the average budget increase for the city of Brownwood was 1.6, where the consumer price index was 1.7, okay? Which would suggest that we're actually doing less today than we were doing in 2009 in relation to our purchasing powers of our dollar. Told you I'd come back to this for a second, budget versus inflation. And it wouldn't be a straight line curve. So what you're going to see is from 2010 until about 2015, we actually were not keeping up with inflation. Our budget was trailing behind the inflationary curve. 2013, inflation was basically flat, flattened out, and we paced up a little bit. And so that actually, where I said that our budget outpaced inflation by 3%, that's actually been in the last 3 years because of that trend there indicated on the graph. So the question becomes, and the honest question that anybody want to know is, where did the money go? And the short answer is it went to our people. It went to the employees. It went to the guy that's standing in the cold water in the utility line. It went to your police officers. It went to your firefighters. So in 2015, we had not done any type of cost of living increase in a couple of years, is my recollection, but certainly not the prior year. So we added a 3% cost of living increase across the board, all the employees. Now, look at that number for a second. I want you to think about this for a second, because I'm going to compare it in a minute to the tax increase that we're going to talk about. 3% tax increase, 3% pay increase for the city employees costs us $380,000. Okay? What you're going to see in a minute is that's actually more than the tax increase, and I'm going to explain why in just a second. In 2015, we went out and we did a budgetary salary survey of our non-civil service positions. And what we found, those are the people inside City Hall. You're not your firefighters, not your police officers, but everyone else. And what we found, unfortunately, was that they were dramatically underpaid and probably have been for a long time. Okay? So we entered into basically a 2-year phase where we're trying to get our people up to kind of industry standards for cities. And in 2015, that added $500,000 to the budget. In 2016, that added $376,000. So you all can do the math, but basically for 3 years, if I were to go back to that chart, where you see the differentiation between spending outpacing inflation, it's basically that 3 years where we gave some pay increases to our people. Okay? Go back to just for 1 second. Last one is important to kind of note. So in this last year, we had a $609,000 increase. What was that for? Well, I'm going to call both of those unfunded mandates, okay? Because in 2017, we had a wastewater treatment plant that we had to renovate to the tune of $6.5 million. No choice in the decision. Love not to have done it, but didn't have that option. And then we had a 14% increase in our health insurance premiums. Okay, so the city pays for the employees' health insurance. They don't pay for dependent coverage. But that 14% increase, along with the wastewater treatment bonds, cost us $609,000. So that's where the money went in the last couple of years. So I wanted to give you some stats on our labor and our employees. If you look at our budget, our $34 million budget, roughly half of that, about $17 million, is straight labor. You look at that, so the question, I guess, that anybody would ask that's a taxpayer, say, well, are we paying our people too well? That's up for you guys to decide, but I'll try to give you some data to make that evaluation. We have 30 employees, 30 out of 288 total employees who earn more than $60,000 a year. 10%. 10% of our employees, which is basically our department heads and our high officials, that actually earn more than $60,000 a year. Average pay for the city is about $41,800 a year. State average household income is about $52,000 a year. So if you're a single parent working for the city, you're about $10,000 a year below the median household wage for the state of Texas. So again, I'm not, in doing this, I certainly don't want to sound defensive in any way in doing this, but I do want to let you all know the types of information that the council use and what we look at when we decide spending and tax issues. Okay? So the next thing I wanted to do is, because of the recent trend about talking about taxes and spending and government spending, I wanted to look at, wow, where's this coming from? Are we really, have we gotten out of control? And that's one of the things I look at the budget and our spending. So I went on the internet and I did some research and I came across this Forbes article. And they ranked states in the best to the worst as far as your total taxes, okay? I figure Forbes can do it a whole lot better than I can as far as good analysis of whether we're right or wrong. So you all know probably what's the worst state? California. They're third from the last. They're third from worst. Keep going. New York. New York is the worst. Okay. New York's effective tax rate for state and local taxes, because that's where the criticism is coming from. It's state and local taxes that have been under attack. Their combined effective tax rate is 12.6%. If you look at the article and you read the article, that takes into consideration your state tax rate, income tax rate of any state, your state and local. It's everything. It's everything you pay at the city or state level. Effective tax rate in New York is 12.6%. California was another one mentioned, third from the bottom, third worst, at 11.4% tax rate. Anybody want to guess where the state of Texas is? Where do you think we are? Fourth from the bottom. Okay? Our effective tax rate is 7.5%. Meaning only 3 states in the United States are taxed less than the people of Texas. So I start with this assumption about there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of dialogue about how highly taxed we are and the things that are going on. But the data suggests that Texas is actually a very favorable place to live and a very favorable place to do business. Under President Bush and under President Perry, there was a lot of discussion about this. And those two governors went across the United States, and they got in some trouble, Governor Perry did, because he used to go around the United States touting that number and trying to get people to leave New York and California to come to the state of Texas, telling them what a great place we were to live and work. But the culture has changed, and the dialogue has changed, and so we're going to kind of go through some of that discussion. Another thing the city of Brownwood looks at is that, okay, so Texas is not the highest tax state in the union. We're far from it. In fact, we're fourth from the bottom. Is Brownwood the highest tax city anywhere in our area? And it's not, okay? So this is the data provided to the council. I didn't accumulate it. I can't vouch for its worthiness, but it is the information that I rely upon because my staff has presented this to me. And so they accumulated several cities. You'll see that as far as total tax dollars collected on this particular list, we're number 8. Now, not the best comparison, to be honest with you, because we're not similarly sized to Abilene, San Angelo, maybe even Cleveland. But we are relatively similarly sized to the rest of them there in the middle. And we're not the highest tax, and we don't generate the most tax revenue as far as total tax dollars at $6.3 million. The next one we looked at, and keep in mind, this is all the stuff we looked at in this past budget year, so it's previous year, not current year. But we look at it on a per capita basis, probably a much more fair comparison. What does every individual in the city pay? You take your total tax take, and you divide it by the total number of people and see what everyone's actually paying. So in the city of Brownwood, the tax revenue per capita, what do you pay in taxes? I mean, statistically, now I know it's a lot more than that. But what does the average person in Brownwood pay? They pay $327, okay? Total tax revenue divided by total population. It's very unfortunate that I have 4 kids, by the way, into that analysis. But what you see is that, look at our tax rate compared to these other cities. Not nearly as high as some of those on the top, but very similar to Weatherford, very similar to Abilene, very similar to Belton, very similar to Early. Look at Early and Brownwood. They're $8 apart in per capita tax revenue. Okay? Now, I frankly never heard a lot of dialogue about whether Brownwood or Early is a higher tax place to live, but the reality is, on the tax revenue per capita, there's $8 difference in those two cities. Okay? So the next question would obviously be, well, okay, but where do our tax dollars go? Surely the spending is frivolous in the way that we spend those dollars, perhaps it is. So I'll look at that too. And this is where it starts getting difficult to explain, complicated, because of the government rules that we deal on. These are our revenue sources. So it's easier to me to skip the general fund for a minute, and everything that's not in the other categories is going to fall in the general fund. So here's the analysis. Basically, utility is basically water. Sanitation is basically the landfill and the trash pickup, okay? Reality, we make a profit off of those businesses, okay? We run them well, and we make a profit off of them. Why? I've had this question before. When the whole drought came up and there was a discussion about the city making profit off of water, why do we make a profit? Why? Because it's subsidizing your tax dollars. It's keeping taxes low because we roll the profit over from water, we roll the profit over from sewer and sanitation, and we prop that tax rate down to keep your tax rate low. What's the net effect of that? The net effect of that is that we operate in an actual loss because our proprietary funds, our water and our sanitation, are operating at a profit and offsetting the losses that we have in our general fund. In common language, our taxes don't pay for our operations. And we're going to go to this next slide. Reality. And by the way, this is, if you were to look at rural America, this is rural America 101. This is what every rural city deals with and does, okay? So, look at our taxes for a second. Our total taxes, if you look at ad valorem taxes and sales tax, it's $10.5 million. It barely pays for fire and police and streets. Doesn't even begin to cover our administrative personnel and all the other things we do. Again, operating our tax fund is operating at a $2.2 million deficit. every year. Okay? So looking at the budget for this last year, y'all know we went up on the tax rate this past year by a few cents, from 74 to 79, and some change on either one of those decibels. But the total budget change was a 2.3% increase in the budget, and I explained the reasons for that a minute ago. But look at why. So when we look at the why behind it, you'll see the implication of that sales tax decline. So our sales tax decline was $412,000, okay? That nickel increase that we passed along, it actually helped us out to the tune of $472,000, okay? Now remember, I said remind that number of a 3% labor cost cost you $380,000, okay? So a nickel generated $472,000. It gives you an idea how hard it is to keep up with those things. So it's not hard to figure out why we had to go up. Sales tax went down. We had some other pilot taxes that went down. So the net impact was effectively the same. Okay? So obviously our hope is that the sales tax will go back up. We'll see a resurgence of that. The first 2 or 3 months of this fiscal year have all been positive. They're going in the right direction. They're going positive, not negative. And if it is, we'll hopefully be able to lower that rate back to where it was for the prior year. All right, here's the thing that I think people don't understand. And I'm trying to think how to say this easily, just so it's easy to understand. I think there's a misconception in government that 100% of what we do is based on your tax dollars. And the reality is your ad valorem taxes are only 17% of every dollar that Brownwood spends. 17%, okay? So and I'm going to get to the point about when we start talking about property tax reform, why that is so important, okay? All right, so Governor Abbott, this is an article from yesterday. This is actually out of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Governor Abbott came out, and look, I applaud the effort. I really do. I pay more taxes than I want to pay. Okay, I live inside the city of Brownwood, pay the same rate you all pay. And I would love to see my property taxes go down. So I really do appreciate the effort. But let me tell you, show you the complexity of how this works. So when they talk about a cap, if it was the city is going to be capped at 2.5 or 4% of our budget, no problem. If I were to go back and look at and show you that chart in a second, for a second of how much we've gone up, remember we've averaged about 2%. I don't need to go up 8, 9, 10% a year. I need to keep up with inflation. From time to time, we're going to have projects that we have to do, like wastewater treatment plant. I need to be able to fluctuate my budget 2 to 4%, okay? The problem is taxes are not 100% of our revenue. They're 17% of our revenue. So here's how it would actually, if the governor's proposal is passed, let me show you what would happen. Budget of $34 million, we have 1% inflation. That means in order to do what I did last year, I'm going to have to raise the budget $343,513.13, okay? Now, our ad valorem taxes are $5,445,000. We have some other pilot taxes. I don't know whether we get to raise those or not under the proposal, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. Adds another $1.3 million to the equation. So a 2.5% increase on those numbers would be $170,000 a year. That's all we could go up, okay? If my inflation is $343,000 and my net annual increase that I can go up is $170,000, I'm operating in a net deficiency of $173,000 every year. What does that mean? It means I got to start cutting things. I got to start laying people off. I got to start doing less roads. I got to start putting less money in parks. I got to start deferring maintenance, all those kinds of things. So here's what I think the answer to this is. There just has to be some honest communication. I'm convinced that we haven't had good communication between folks at the local level and the state level. Frankly, I'm not sure that the folks at the state level really understand that analysis. And why would they? Most of them haven't run a city before, right? They've been operating at the state level. And the state budget's funded totally different. So there needs to be some honest communication so that they can understand that what's happening and why it's happening. Okay? So one of the things that's commonly said, and also in the tax issue, is that they've come in and they've said that, well, people are being taxed out of their homes. That's the common practice. At least not in the city of Brownwood. In the city of Brownwood in 2015, y'all remember in 2014, the voters of Brown County voted in a tax freeze for the county. The city council then followed that lead and said the voters have spoken. There's no reason for us to oppose this. And we voted in that same 65 and over tax freeze for the city of Brownwood. Okay? So if you live in the city of Brownwood, your taxes, let me say that again, your taxes should not go up after you're 65 years of age. A lot of miscommunication about this. We've seen lots of stuff in the public that, well, that only applies to the rate and it doesn't apply to the valuation. Not true. The ordinance is on the screen there. The ordinance is, it applies to the total amount of tax you pay. You hit 65 in the city of Brownwood, your taxes don't go up. Is there an economic consequence to that? Yes. Okay? The economic consequence to all the other taxpayers in the city of Brownwood this year was $93,000. Okay? So, if we had no tax freeze, we'd have collected $93,000 more. But the tax freeze cost $93,000. So everyone else, the city of Brownwood, pays approximately, combined, $93,000 more than we would have otherwise. It's the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do at all. I think it is the right thing to do because it alleviates that argument about elderly people being taxed out of their home. Does it have an economic cost? It has a real economic cost. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to skip through this last part, man. Funded, but again, just to give you an example of the types of issues and things that we're dealing with. So, in trying to control spending, one of the things that's the most frustrating for the city, for the water district, for the county, for the school district, is all the things that we are forced to do that we don't want to do. Talked about the wastewater treatment plant. Let me give you this one because this one really got under my skin. So, in the last flood, the Riverside Park had an area of erosion. Okay? Federal government says those are navigable waters and therefore not your property, my property. And the Corps of Engineers has to approve any plan that you have to fix that eroding bank. Okay, I don't like that, but we'll deal with it. So we go to the Corps of Engineers and we say, here's what we're going to do to fix the bank of the river in our park. Corps of Engineers comes back and says, well, you can't do that until you do an archaeological dig to find out whether there's any significant archaeological artifacts in the area where you're going to repair the river. Okay? $8,000. $8,000 to do an archaeological dig in the state park before we can actually begin to even address the erosion issues. So I'm going to forego this last one for a second and not talk about that. This is a discussion we can have for another day. Go back to the very first slide for a second, the video. Okay? So, I'm convinced that, let's pause for a second. I'm convinced of this. I'm convinced that good people can sit down and figure out the solution. I don't have any solutions to that. For how because look, I share the concern and the criticism about your property taxes going up. And I would like nothing more than to be able to lower them. I'm struggling with trying to figure out how. I really am. If you have exponential growth in the city, okay, then you've got some economies of scale to work with that you can deal with. But in rural America, we don't have that. We don't have 10%, 15, 20% growth in a year. And so it's very, very difficult to do. I don't know what the solutions are. I think good dialogue with our state officials and our elected officials is a good start. There's only so many solutions out there, only so many ways to slice the pie. I told somebody this yesterday, I did it jokingly, but it gives you an idea. Seriously, so I'd be more than happy to not even have property taxes. State give us 2% sales tax, which is roughly equal to what we collect in ad valorem tax, and I'll get out of the property tax business and not even affect it. But that's never going to happen, okay? But as a community and as a state, we've got to continue to have some of those discussions. So I'm going to ask Marshall to rewind that. I'm going to end this way. Folks, the city of Brownwood is blessed And I've talked a lot today about the struggle we're having in financial matters, but I don't want you to get lost in what I said. All of your economic indicators, other than sales tax, 5 of the 6 economic indicators we always look at, are off the charts good. Building is up, and our tourism dollars are up, and we're having residential construction projects. There are a lot of really good things going on. Okay? It's not all bad out there. And I want you to realize how blessed we are to have the things we have. And I want you to watch this video. We're going to end with the video. I just want you to watch it. When the video is over, the presentation will be over. But I want you to be reminded about how great Brownwood is.